So one day I received this deck called Tongue of the Trees by the amazing Elizabeth Ashley, which is a beautiful oracle card deck based on essential oils. If you haven't got it, you need to get your hands on it straight away. As I'm filing through and looking at each of the cards, there's the usual suspects of lavender and cypress and so on. And then there's this unusual essential oil in there, and it's called Monarda. Now, since then, I've got my hands on some Monarda, but I still don't know much about it. So today on Fellowship of the Essential Oils, I've got not just one expert to talk about it, but two. So Elizabeth is joining us as per usual. How are you, Elizabeth?
Well, I'm very well, thank you. And I didn't know that story. That's lovely. Yes, I'm excited to teach you about this oil then. And
But
Helen,
yes, Helen Naglesmith, who's joining us as well, one of our experts in the world about oils that are a little bit off the beaten track.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me. So yeah, Monarda, I have to say, when I first started writing about it, I went straight to Liz's work as well. Because there's not much written about it. So it's quite, for us, certainly in the UK, it's quite an unusual oil to work with.
Elizabeth, do you want to start off by maybe sharing a little bit about how you came across this essential oil?
well, I came about it completely backwards, really. So people who watch the videos often will have heard me refer to the fact that I have dodgy blood. And I found that out in 2008 when I was newly pregnant with Dexter, and I developed blood clots in both my lungs, but particularly in my left lung. And so pulmonary embolism, also pleurisy. I've never been so ill before or after, and many people who saw me at the time said, I've never seen anybody so ill as you were. It was awful, and I just couldn't breathe, couldn't get my breath. And because he was carrying a baby, there was very little anybody could do about it. They gave me painkillers and I had blood thinning medication, but as long as my body was like trying to sustain thick blood for the baby, there was nothing that could happen. And so I had these, funny enough, my best friend has had a DVT this week. And she said, I had these blooming injections in my belly. And I went, oh, I know. She went, did you have them every day for a year? I said, I did. She went, I said, I know. But I did. So I had to have these blood thinning medications every day at 8 o'clock. And Dexter was born, and I have to say, the second Dexter was born, I was like, oh my goodness, I feel better. But I had to keep on having more injections for about, if I remember rightly, about 9 months after. But my lungs remained very poorly, and they were very scarred. I was at every opportunity I would get a really bad chest infection, end up in hospital. I'm allergic to lilac, so as soon as the lilac came out in the spring, I'd be back in hospital, steroids, etc. Then eventually we moved house and we moved over to Ludlow, and I have to say, where we lived before was a very polluted place. We lived for anybody in England, we lived on right on junction 10 of the M6, very, very dirty air. We came here and, living amongst the trees, straight away my body started to heal. Dexter went to a school that was like, I call the hill Mordor, that I had to climb every day. It was very steep. So, that exercise really helped as well. But for the most part, day to day, my chest was better. But I would always have these terrible events in the winter, etc. So I was like, right, so I am really going to concentrate all of my efforts. I'm going to write a book about bronchitis, COPD, which it was by then, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. And I'm just going to get all of the information that I can and just try and get the most effective set of oils I could. And oddly, within 6 weeks, it was done. I was just better. And so the book, and I have to say, the book is the book that most people email me about and say, you made me better. And so I would heartily recommend this. But amongst it, I found this clinical trial, this study that had said that geraniol and thymol can rectify pulmonary fibrotic tangles. And I was like, wait, what? I don't even know what those, that's just word salad. I don't even know what that means. But you know how your body goes, but you do need to look. I was like, no, I can't leave that. I've got to, so I was in the books. I was like, I think that this means it stops scarring. That can't be right. So everybody I knew, I was going, look at this trial, look at these words. What does this mean? And it was like my body was like too scared to even go there, that I might be able to get rid of this scarring. Anyway, so after about 6 days of sitting on it and going, you do need to look at this and just try, stop being worried about it, just try it. Find what oils have got the highest levels of geraniol and I thought, well, that's obvious. And thought, maybe not. What would be great is I could find an oil that had both. So I have Tisserand's book on essential safety for health professional, whatever it's called, on my computer on Kindle. So it's able to use the search function. So we used advanced search, tried to work out, right, what oil has the most Chimol geraniol in. And he came up with this oil. I was like, never heard of it. What on earth is that? Now, if you spend enough time in clinical trials, you'll often find, well, that's a very useful piece of information. Thank you for telling me about an essential oil that you cannot buy. And that was what I was expecting to happen, that somebody had manufactured it in a lab and it was not available. But lo and behold, it was available. So I thought, oh, I've got to get me some of that. And when it came, I was like, that's so beautiful. I was never told about that oil. So what I will say is that it smells like bergamot, but just ethereal and light and so pretty and happy. And you know what? If you've got bad lungs, it's hard to feel happy. You just don't feel very happy very often. So to get that, oh goodness me! And you could feel that my lungs were getting bigger, and I could just breathe easier. Oh, crack cocaine. Give it me. And so I used it, because I really like it. I do think it's one of the prettiest oils there is. But winter came round and everybody was kind of watching at the corner of their eye with trepidation to see, you know, she's invested a lot psychologically in this. When's the hospital coming? When's she going to have this crisis? How's she going to deal with that crisis? But it never came. And I was breathing much better. I felt happier. My actual shape of my chest changed shape. So if you, Helen will know, I don't know if people will know outside of this. We used to, when we were kids, have a comedian called Michael Crawford. He did his character was Frank Spencer, and he did this thing called Some Mothers Do Have 'Em, and he was this gangly little creature, very funny, like visual comic. But somewhere along the line, he discovered that he could sing, and he became the Phantom of the Opera. He was the iconic Phantom of the Opera, and this singing changed his whole shape, and he got these huge shoulders and this big chest because his lungs had been used and grown so much. And whilst mine didn't go as much as that, I was like, did change because I was using my lungs better. And I've been like that. And I wasn't deliberately doing any kind of Pilates or something, but all of the muscular tissues in my back and shoulders changed, and I was able to stand up straight. And all of it is down to this little oil.
Wow. And that's, you know, and I can see obviously why you love it so much. Helen, you obviously have had a bit of a journey with Monarda as well. Do you want to share a little bit about how it came into your life and then what you've been using it for since?
Yeah, sure. So there was a couple of points that Liz made that I'd really like to pick up on, actually. One of them was about your chest changing. I find that really fascinating because in today's society, we do a lot of stuff curled in. You know, we sit at our computers and we type. You know, so many of my clients are computer bound by their job, you know, or people that are doing long periods of driving, their arms are in front, they're curling in like this. But also when we're frightened or nervous or in protective mode, we do the same. And then we can't breathe, we can't expand properly. But actually what's really interesting is, I think, for people who have issues with breathing and their chest, whether that be asthma or chest infection or whatever it is, typically everything still goes like this because it's protective mode, because it's fear. I can't breathe, I can't breathe, I can't get enough in. And actually what we need to be doing is like opening out, allowing that air to come in. But actually the fragility of how that sits with you often makes you curl in and be anxious. So it's really interesting to think about it in listening to you talking about it in terms of what that does to your body and how that makes your body change. And for me, Monarda is an oil that I hadn't had much experience with at all. I had heard about it because of your book and hearing you talk about it, Liz, but I hadn't really worked with it. And for me, it's very much an oil that kind of, it sits in the background and I don't use it very often. But every time I use it, I think, why the heck don't I use it more often? It's like, you know, kind of the analogy I have for it is it's like you imagine a classroom full of children and you have noisy, boisterous children who command a lot of attention. You have really intelligent children who are putting their hand up and want to ask a question all the time. And then you have this kind of quiet, quite resilient children who are just literally left to coast because the teacher doesn't have the capacity to manage all these children necessarily. And for me, that's kind of how Monarda is. You know, it sits in the box and it just kind of coasts and goes, I'm here when you're ready. And then it pops out. But actually, really useful in terms of, you know, it is highly antiviral. So it's good from an antifungal point of view. So I've used it for things like athlete's foot, for example, but also for, you know, things like infection and stuff as well. And on an emotional level, very much I use it in my practice with people who are anxious, who are nervous, often who are waiting for something that they're frightened of. So like waiting for hospital results, for example. And I'd typically then blend it with something that I would feel that would give them an additional layer of comfort. So something like neroli or something. And then something grounding probably as well. So that's probably how I tend to use it most. So I find it's quite nice if people need to relax and have that sense of letting go as well. So I find it useful for people who are struggling with sleep, but I would put it in with other things normally. I wouldn't normally use it on its own. But I think its aroma is so useful, and I think it really allows other oils to come to the fore as well. So if you put it with you know, like you said, Liz, it's really it's a really nice smell. I've never met anybody who doesn't like it. You know, I find the same thing with bergamot. It's really easy for everyone to like it. So it's really easy to put in a blend. There's nothing offensive about its aroma to anybody. And because of that, I think, again, it just kind of chugs along quite silently in the background, but it does some quite profound work when it's kind of allowed to. But yeah, I find it's really quite good for emotional stress. And that's probably how I use it the most, to be honest.
So if I can touch, I think what you said there about fear was so like telling. One of the things I find quite challenging doing this job is whenever something goes wrong, everybody goes, what are you using to put that right? So, but I am very much of the school that for a moment you stop and watch and you go, right, I'm just going to wait and see what this is playing out, because what is this trying to teach me? Well, body's trying to teach me something, so why am I trying to suppress it straight away? And what's interesting is I had that gap of time naturally with my lungs to be able to see that. And it's very clear to me that the blood clot in the first place was a fear response, because getting pregnant with Dexter was the worst kind of shock. The day before, I'd filled in university application forms for the big two, and I was marrying a man who had said, I don't want to have children. And suddenly here I was with this, well, I did 30 pregnancy tests because I just didn't believe. I found out actually I was pregnant. on a ultrasound scan to date when I was going to have my hysterectomy, because the moment of his implantation had been so severe, they thought I'd had a really catastrophic event with a fibroid, and they were looking and they were like, "That's not a fibroid. That's a little fetus. That's a 5-week-old fetus." So I was completely in shock. 2 days before I'd accepted another job and handed in my notice. And then the day before that, we'd been burgled. And so people had invaded our space. I went to this new job. I was thrown into a job, another role that was totally inadequate and wrong for me. I wasn't suited for it at all. People were ringing up at 2 o'clock in the morning saying, get out of bed, come and deal with this crisis. And I was pregnant and in shock. And my whole body went, whoa, and lo and behold, blood clot. And I couldn't ever deal with that fear for a long, long time. It was just like things just got more and more and more. I lost my job. My husband was made redundant. We lost our house. They just kept piling up on top of me. And my lungs just kept getting worse. And it was only when we came here and it was like, okay, the universe clearly wanted to put us here, because as soon as we got here, everything was like, and now breathe. We just, everything was resolved. But yeah, everything was a fear response. And that is, I think, how it happened. And so I do think you're quite right that the Monarda dealt with the stress as well as the actual fibrotic tissue, but also just went, you need to just like process all the shit. There was so much it went on for it. So funnily enough, it was like you could look at it in an astrological chart and see, oh my God, that family is just going to go through hell, and we did. And yeah, my body took it. But as soon as the Monarda just went, just breathe. Let's deal with this scarring. Let's open things up. It all just trickled away. And when I was researching it, you're quite right, there's nothing written about the essential oil, but to me the effects have been so dramatic that I really wanted to process it and kind of say, you need to look at this oil. And one of the things that was important to me was exactly what you said. Whenever I make a blend for Daryl, he goes, why is it everything you make smells horrible? Because like respiratory oils do, don't they? They're very clinical. They're very like, you will do this now. Whereas this was like, hi, come and play. And I really liked that. But there's lots of stuff written about it in herbalism. For some reason, American herbalism in particular, because it grows wild there. And I can remember finding and falling in love with some work by a writer called Kiva Rose. Never discovered her before, but I am hooked on the way she writes. And she'd said, look, she goes up to and collects it wild. And she said it's like floating away on butterfly wings. And I was like, oh, that's so true. And I do think that if somebody has that might be the downfall of the oil in a way, because as you say, there are those different kids in the classroom. Such a great analogy. There are those who are quite like the boisterous ones are very yang, but then you do have ones who are very yin and quite shy and not able to push themselves forwards. And having problems with your lungs does make you more yin, makes you feel like you want to live on benefits. You don't want to go to work. You haven't got that energy. Everybody owes you a living, because I really am not up to doing anything. And if you've got somebody who is quite of a yin disposition, or if you've got somebody who's like a floaty healer, let me heal you. In the book I write, and it made me laugh to read it again, because I thought, oh, that's so accurate. I've forgotten I'd written it, but it is exactly what happens. It does turn your brain to candy floss, because it's just so like airy fairy already. So if you're an airy fairy person already, it's just, you're just not going to do anything for days, it's just like, oh, I'm just going to sit and watch butterflies. So you do have to be careful of that angle. But I think it's the Lakota people. It's used a lot in Native American medicine, clearly obviously the plant rather than the oil, but they bathe their babies in it to strengthen them, to protect them, and to help against infections and viruses and stuff. So that shows A, how gentle it is, but B, how much they trust it. You know, it's reliable to look after our most precious thing. That's the first thing they do. It's almost like, I don't want to use the word baptism because that's a Christian word, but whatever they do to consecrate their baby, to say special, and offer the new spirit gratitude for the new birth. So they bathe him in Monarda, and I think that's very, very telling. So yeah, I do think you're right that there was the trauma response probably made a big difference, but I do think the energetics of the oil helped on so many different levels. Really interesting to see.
So as I've been listening to you both speak, obviously it excels with a respiratory oil. Now, normally when people are wanting a respiratory oil, they'll go for a eucalyptus or a ravensara, a laurel, or even a frankincense. But would you say maybe Monarda might be a good oil to go for when the respiratory issue is linked to something emotional?
So if you read, I'm going to give you a yes and no answer. I can never give straight answers, can you? So there's a tremendous book called When the Body Speaks the Mind by a lady called Deb Shapiro, and another lady called Natalie Kent. Maybe he's done a lot of work on what happens to the body to sort of match up with the different emotions, so that you kind of become a bit you can able to reverse engineer what might be going on. And where it comes from, the lungs and the lower respiratory system is a lot to do with grief and shock, but upper respiratory system here is to do with the throat chakra and expression and not saying things that you feel that you want to say. And I had so much, there was so many things I couldn't say. Like, I shouldn't say that I didn't want a baby, because actually I was very happy that I was, but I was very worried about the ramifications of that. I was very angry about people having come into our house. I was very annoyed at myself for having screwed up the job, but also furious at the situation that had led to it, and it was out of my control. And so there was all these things, just one that I just thought, you shouldn't say any of those things. All of them are bad things to say. And they were aggressive things. And so they stayed there and they made me dark and angry. So to have a happy oil that's kind of just goes, but just let it go away in butterflies, meant I didn't actually need to say them. They just disappeared. And now, because I know I don't feel them, I feel able to say that's what I felt, but I don't feel it now. So this idea of locked anger, yeah. But if it was grief, well, grief makes you already very yin, very kind of not wanting to do anything. So no, you would want something like more yang to be able to balance that. And likewise, it is a good antiviral, it is a good antibiotic, but on both cases, there are stronger ones. So I would, as Helen said, she mixes it with the other oils, very rare. I use this one independently. So I would perhaps use Elimi or Ravensara. Big hitters for if I've got a chest infection, I'm going to deal with the infection with stronger oils. For me, the medicine, definitely, if you've got, do you know what, long COVID, definitely, because of the scarring, because what's left behind that hasn't been processed, I would say that's where its strength is, the after effects of the lung trauma. Yeah.
Helen, you've got eucalyptus, frankincense, and Monarda. When do you go for Monarda for a respiratory oil?
I think I wouldn't use it on its own. I would blend with it. So I would probably use it maybe even with something like frankincense and something else. I mean, I think the beauty of it is those classical kind of respiratory oils do tend to smell quite pokey, and a lot of people don't like them. Children particularly don't seem to like them. whereas if you've got reduced sensitivity to smell, maybe because of age or because of other medication you're taking, and your sense of smell isn't so great, you're quite often less offended by the more respiratory sort of smelling oils. But I think the nice thing about Monarda is because it is very soft and kind of all-encompassing, there's something that's very rounded about the aroma. It can take the edge off those harsher smelling, more clinical oils. So actually placing them together can really bring them down a bit. Or even, things like, I find Roman chamomile quite a strong smell on its own. I find it quite, sometimes, but again, you blend with it and it just brings it down a level. So I would probably put it with a couple of other oils at the time, but I would perhaps think about using it more at the end of the day, like sleep time, for example, because when you have anything going on a respiratory level, sleep can be A, really tricky, and B, there's no worse time to be awake than in the middle of the night when it feels like the rest of the world's asleep and you're on your own. And if you're struggling with breathing, that can be really frightening. I used to have chest infections for years and ended up going on steroids at different points. And I've had, like Liz, I've had pleurisy, and it's honestly terrifying if you feel you can't breathe properly. If it feels like you're being stabbed every time you breathe, it's terrifying. So I would use it with something that perhaps felt like it was a little bit grounding, but then with another respiratory oil as well at night. And maybe pair it with something like Rosalina, actually, because I feel Rosalina's got quite a nice ethereal side to it as well. And it's not as harsh as some of those other, like a eucalyptus. It doesn't have that harshness that eucalyptus does. So yeah, I would maybe go down that route.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. So sorry, I didn't mean to. I can't see you with this setup. Sorry. The other area I would say that we haven't really touched on, somebody who has pneumonia in particular comes at end of life. It is, I'm not a death doula, but I would have thought that just that sort of lightening of spirit is helpful. But emphysema as well, where you can't actually inflate your own lung tissue anymore. So that kind of energetic of, it's butterflies, very, very lightening. So yeah, one of a really surprising thing to me was I go across to Budapest to go and speak at the Drops conference for Gergely Halodi, and each time I go, people from Hungary go, "Thank you for writing about Monarda. Nobody ever writes about it, and it's our favourite oil." And I'm like, wait, what? How do you have this pocket of people? And I have discovered that there's a lady who teaches in one of the main schools who is also a midwife. And she always recommends it for people who are giving birth, who are frightened when they're giving birth. And I just thought that's so perfect, because yes, that is really like, just let it go. You can just imagine all of the relaxation in the pelvis and them just going up. Fear really slows down labour, doesn't it? So just kind of just go, just go, just be out. It was kind of bizarre to think it was the same thing as just be out with all of my trauma, but I really saw how that would fit. And they all said, we just love Monarda. We use it a lot for stress, for pregnancy, for lots of things, because it's just so gentle.
Yeah. And effective as well, I think, for things like, cystitis, urinary tract infections and things like that, which again, if you think about the link there, sort of you look at traditional Chinese medicine with the kidneys, and again, with fear, we talk about lungs with fear as well. And I think that's quite interesting as well, because very often UTIs come about because of stress. People are doing too much. It's literally the body's way of making you stop. You can't go out because you need to be near a toilet. It's that simple. It's like, right, you slow down, you have to stop now. And I think it's quite useful from that perspective as well. I have heard a couple of people say that they found that there have been issues with sensitivity to it, and I think that's possibly because of the citral. So maybe don't use it if you've got really sensitive skin. But I think I've never had an issue with it. None of my clients have, if I'm honest. So
no, normally I wouldn't have thought of using it for cystitis and that kind of thing. But yeah, again, very yang conditions, hot, reactive. So yeah, all of those things. I'm just looking at the cover of the book. We'll show you because there's a story. So it's a very misleading picture, but my own sense of humor. So this is what a Monarda looks like, and the Native American First Nation settlers, they make a tea of it called Oswego tea. But the essential oil doesn't come from that colour. It comes from a pale, sort of almost like, well, actually this colour flower. So that's Monarda fistulosa. This here is Monarda didyma, which you can get an essential oil of, but not commercially. But I was just like, whoa, that's got a hummingbird. Yeah, got to have the hummingbird. So that was the end of that. All realism went out of the window. But yeah, so it's like a pinky colour. And I would heartily recommend to people in the UK, grow it in your garden. It's just the last 2 or 3 years started appearing in all of the garden centres. It's very pretty, with my bee priestess head on. The bees love it, the butterflies love it, everybody loves it, and it's just jolly. But you need to put it somewhere where it's quite damp if you can, because naturally it grows by the side of a river. If you put it somewhere too dry, which I have done on a couple of occasions, you kind of get like a rust on the leaves rather than the petals, which is unfortunate, because making a tea out, it is delicious. It just tastes like lemon tea. And I have to say, although it smells like bergamot, my most hated thing is Earl Grey tea. I just think it's the most disgusting thing. It feels like I've massaged a rugby player's arse and then forgotten to wash my hands. Just why would anybody drink that? But this does not taste like Earl Grey tea. It tastes like lemon tea, which is really lovely.
I'm wondering where I can find a rugby player's ass that smells like bergamot.
Well, anyway, anytime you put bergamot on. So back in the day, I used to do Aston Villa Football Club for a short amount of time. So I actually did Gareth Southgate once. that's my claim to fame, or his legs. Yeah, but the whole thing of why haven't you washed your hands? Vile. Don't know how anybody can drink it.
One other theme that I've seen kind of poking up occasionally when you've both been speaking is about, things that are kind of lingering, like that scarring and that. If we kind of move more into this kind of emotional and spiritual realm for Monarda, do you think someone who's been holding on to pain or holding on to grief for a long time, this might be a gentle oil to kind of usher them out of that habit of being in that grief or pain state or suffering state?
Yeah, I definitely think so, because you just can't stay down there. It is. So I think, so I can't remember who said it to me. That's annoying, because it was a really nice analogy. Do you remember the old cartoon Up, where there was the old man and he lifted his house with the helium balloons and he floated away with the helium balloons? It is like that. It's like, whoa, I just can't really make any difference. I can't stay down here, but it is lifting me. It is like that. It's like being in helium. It really is a magical oil, and I'm quite disappointed in a way, because as you know, I'm writing this piece about nymphs, and the beginning of the piece, you have to be transported to Athens. I'm not going to say any more than that, but a way to transport you to Athens. And I'd said to Frances, who is producing the oils, do you do Monarda? Because I was thinking that's just perfect. It just would feel like you had just been lifting and sailing away. And she's like, no. So go do a hyssop, which is not quite as good. But it does give you that effect of like, oh, I'm just flying. I'm flying. Where am I going? It's very jolly. See how smiley I am? It's just because I kept smelling it. So yeah, if somebody's depressed, yes, but it's not very easy to get a hold of. So I will tell you that, so this battered old thing, look, you can hardly read it. It's brand name is called We Essence. So we as in oil, Huiles. You can get that on Amazon in the UK. In America, Nature's Gift sell it. And I think now maybe Oshadi sell it in the UK as well.
Yeah, they do. Mine's
so
Oshadi,
it's not going to be easy to get your hands on, but once you get it, you're just going to be like, I can't be without that.
It does still fascinate me, especially with that unique chemistry. And I get excited about unique chemistry in some of the other oils, the Australian oils in Helen's book, things like Rosalina, like Fregonia. They do boast this really unique combination of oils that we normally just, have to combine a couple of oils with. So can you think of any reason why it hasn't become more popular?
Well, I just think that there's nobody's marketing it is the answer to that. And probably because it doesn't, it's kind of a back and forth thing. If somebody's not marketing it, nobody's asking to buy it. If nobody's asking to buy it, nobody's going, I need to grow loads of that, distill that. And then when they've distilled loads, then they market it. So there's like that thing. But it's a really easy plant to grow. It would be such a good thing to have as a crop, because it flowers and flowers and flowers and flowers. You cut the head off and more come back. So it's not like Hyssop has got like 2 weeks of flowering, although you want to distill before the flowers because the flowers change chemistry. But those or rose again a month long. Now Monarda's got a long time. I would really heartily recommend to people start growing it. Have it in your garden, definitely.
So it'd be a nice one for artisan distillers, wouldn't it? People who are making very small quantities who could grow it. I'm going to plant some now at the bottom of my allotment where it's a little bit claggy and wet, and see how it goes, because that's where my flower garden is, at the bottom of my allotment.
It'll love it there. Really love it.
Yeah, it's
interesting. So you must let me know what chemotype you choose, because there's so many different subspecies available now. I think the National Collection of Monardas is not far from here, actually. I've discovered, although I haven't been, but they've got 43 species, and I was like, ooh, that takes some doing. I'm going to do that. Yeah.
Now, we have some famed questions that we normally start wrapping up with on most of our episodes these days. First of all, we'll throw it to you, Helen. Is this an oil that people who are essential oil lovers at home, maybe not an aromatherapist, do you think it's an oil they need to have in their collection?
So my answer to that is that you always go with what you're drawn to. So if you're listening to this and you go, I want to find out more, then you're something's telling you that this is an oil you need. So I suppose that's the way I look at things, rather than, do people need these top 5 or these top 10 or these top 20 oils? I kind of go to what you're drawn to, because there's a reason you're drawn to it, right? To my mind. So follow your intuition. So if there's something that we've said today about it that makes people think, yeah, there's something in that for me, then track it down, because it is possible to get hold of it, for sure. And yeah, I think following your intuition with the oils is the most important thing.
Would you give the same advice? Oh, sorry, go on.
So I was going to say, it's quite it's got quite a lot of uses, so it's quite expansive in terms of how you can use it as well. So it's going to partner nicely with other oils in your kit. The only thing I guess I would say is about, in terms of cautions, there's possible interactions with certain medications, so just to be aware of that, maybe. And if you're not sure about that, consult somebody who knows about that. But generally, I think it's a really lovely oil, and I think more of us should be talking about it. I think more of us should be. But again, like Liz said, it's very chicken and egg, isn't it? If nobody's talking about it, if nobody's writing about it much, then if not, it doesn't, the demand isn't there. So it's kind of one of those kind of suck it and sees. But yeah, I think it's one of the things that when I ran out, I went back and reordered that. So it's kind of like, it's here to stay in my kit now. Yeah.
So would you give a similar, if people are drawn to it as an essential oil lover, they should maybe give it a shot? What about a professional aromatherapist? Do you think they need to have it in their kit, or again, would you allow them to, follow their intuition?
Yeah, again, I'd say follow your intuition, because again, if this is something that you need to know about, or sometimes as aromatherapists, we're listening to something, we're watching something, or we read something and the name keeps cropping up for us, that's the sign. That's the bit that we often forget to follow. And sometimes, you listen to something, you think, oh, I need to get that because of this. Or you have a particular client in mind, you go, right, I'm going to try that oil for them and see how that goes. And that's when you need to start kind of not experimenting with it, because we kind of do everything with information and knowledge at our hands, don't we? We make informed choices. But that's where you then start using it and going, okay, how am I going to use it? What place does it have in my work?
Liz, is there anything you'd add to that?
Yeah, I think I absolutely agree with everything that Helen said there. Yeah, I do think that oils have the power to call to you from far off places, like that did when I looked at the Tisserand's book, and it went, it's something there you need to look at. But I think also it kind of depends on the focus of your practice, because there's lots of people who have generalist practices, but if you are somebody who gets, for example, if I was still in Warsaw, I know that I would have loads of people with pulmonary complaints, COPD, because of the nature of the pollution in the area. So therefore, yes, you definitely need it, because you've seen loads of lung issues. But if and likewise, if you were a midwife, knowing what the girls have said in Hungary, yeah, I think I would be like, oh, that would be really useful for that. If you're treating people who have got emotional disturbance and you're seeing a lot of depression, yeah, again. But I mean, if you were treating, I'm trying to think of something like skin. No, it's if you do like a dermatology person, not really. It's not a really very useful oil from a dermatology point of view. So you need to look, if you're looking at it from like a business point of view, you need to look at, well, is this something I'm going to use a lot? And the answer to that is depends on what you treat. So yeah, but also again, if you're somebody who gets angry a lot, the red hair comes out again, then yeah, it's very helpful.
Now I'm going to force. Go on, Liz.
Just to refer, because I haven't mentioned safety. Helen referred to the safety aspect. Actually, it is a safe oil. So maximum dilution 3%. Don't use in the first 16 weeks of pregnancy, which we would say anyway about any oil. Just because it's got high levels of geraniol, if you're somebody who really doesn't respond well to heavy perfumes, get a lot of headaches or allergic reactions to perfumes, it's usually the geraniol that does it. So therefore, you would want to exercise caution with this oil because of its high levels of geraniol. And actually, just saying that, completely unrelated, high levels of geraniol are also how you get rid of bed bugs, incidentally. So I don't want to go there anyway, but just my head went there. I was like, oh, okay, I'll say it. Somebody told me. So yeah, so safety, dead easy, but just and actually though, it does kind of go a bit off after a while. This is a really old bottle. I've got a newer one, but this is my favourite one. And it's kind of going a bit flat, and those kind of situations do lead to skin sensitization. So I would say replace it every sort of 3-4 years, which is less than the manufacturers usually say. Yeah.
Now I'm guessing we might not see eye to eye on this topic, Liz. For me, I actually found I probably out of the three of us have definitely worked with it the least. But when it comes to the chakras, I find with it such uplifting kind of energy, I actually have found it helpful with the third eye chakra. Now, the third eye chakra, often the emotions that stop our intuition kicking in are either doubt or disbelief. And I found the lightness of Monarda could actually help to counteract that. It may not necessarily help to bring intuitive messages through, but it helps to remove the blockages that help our intuition to kick in. if that makes sense.
I do not disagree. Actually, I heartily agree. And you may notice that when I'm talking about it, what I see are like butterflies and twinkly stuff, and it's like you see the hidden stuff in nature that you might not have seen before. So again, I absolutely agree with you that I don't think it's kind of one that opens the third eye to be able to say, oh, you can hear voices and you can hear all those things, but you do see hidden layers of beauty with it. I heartily agree with you.
And would
I
you
would
give it
say throat chakra, heart chakra myself. Yeah.
planetary wise?
I don't know. I can't remember what I wrote. I would say Moon, Venus, I guess, but I can't remember what I wrote. You tell me, and I'll have to see if I actually did write it in the book.
Oh,
Carry on.
I wouldn't have a firm stance on this, but I might kind of give it to Jupiter for being it's a bit expansive and helps us to go forward.
I like it. I like
Yeah.
it.
Helen,
What I did, yeah, sorry, go on, Hel.
anything
No,
you
I was just gonna say about this sort of I remember, Liz, in your book you refer to it about removing sort of stagnation as well. So that moving on, I think, is quite a big part of Monarda, isn't that?
Yeah, and so actually just I glanced, I was like, oh, elk medicine, I forgot about elk medicine. That was really interesting. So of course the First Nations people see things slightly differently in terms of their chemotypes, their archetypes, than we do. And as somebody who obviously has animals as totems, I always am fascinated. And they use it as a manifestation of elk medicine. And the reason for that is they deal with like sadness in a different way to how we do in the West. So when somebody's sad here, everybody congregates around them and like supports and goes, is everything all right? Is there anything I can do? The First Nations people, or certainly I think it was the Lakota tribe and maybe the Sioux, but I would hate to say if that was correct. Let's view it differently, and they say, well, if you are sad and you are angry, you have things to process. So elks go off on their own and just wander and do a bit like, I guess, Australian walkabout. They just go and they process, and they process and they process and they wander off. And this is what they're encouraged to do in these tribes, that you just take your clothes and walk in nature, walk in nature and work in nature. And then what happens is when a tribe comes, an elk comes across another herd, they're just welcomed into the new herd, and it's like, okay, you've been walking, like, okay, part of the new stuff. And so these people who have been walking just kind of come back, and the tribe just go, everything all right now? And they go, yeah, and life carries on as it is. And so there's this idea of like the elk supports them, that the elk knows what you're going through and just silently walks alongside with you. And I thought that's so good description, because it's just like, come on, where should we go? Should we go in the fairies? It is lovely, just this idea of you just go off and you process. And funnily enough, and I didn't mean to, that is where I came in, isn't it? Where I said, don't just react and go treat it, just process and see what it's trying to teach you. Monarda's very good at saying, let's go and explore it. Let's go and find out what this is about.
Helen, anything you'd add?
Yeah, just that I think I feel it's got quite a transitional element to it in terms of its energy, which I think kind of flows in with what Liz has been saying about the elk. I love that. I can visualize that really well, and I can see how it's very similar. And it's some oils are very much about just sitting with you where you're at, or allowing you just to be where you're at, whereas I think other oils are about moving you through taking you on, you know, that transitional sort of like, we're not going to stay in one place. We're going to kind of move, process, like you said, Liz, process with this. So I think it's a very good oil for that, really good oil for that.
I can't think of another one, Hel, that's so yin and so light and airy. Can you think of another one?
Well, it's funny because you see, I kind of I get what you mean about the light airiness, but when I was working with it yesterday, I just kept seeing this orange ball. And for me, I think it's about, it's so smooth, it's so round, it takes all the sharp edges off things. So it's almost got like an anesthetizing element to it, you know?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So for me, clary sage is a little bit light and airy and fluffy for me. I can't do diddly squat if I've worked with clary sage with a client. I'm good for nothing afterwards. So I have to be really, really careful with it because I just don't care about anything. I'm like, whatever, you know. So I can't actually sit down at my computer and do work. I can't have a deep and meaningful conversation with anybody. I just want to go and sit and be and just chill, you know. There's nothing left in the tank really, and maybe Monarda has some elements of that as well. I couldn't put the two together because for me I'd be rendered utterly useless.
Yeah, I agree
but
with
actually maybe, you know, there are some people that really desperately need that, aren't there? There are some people that are so in need of actually, let's just chill, let's just take away that stuff so you don't care, let it just, like you say, float away like the butterflies. And then maybe then putting Monarda and clary sage together could work really well. But for me, I couldn't function. I'd just be lying in bed going, I don't care, whatever.
So I'm gonna do a quick pitch for Helen's book here. Hel, you've got a recipe in there with Monarda and the oil that I can never remember, Moldovan, whatever, that I really want you to tell us more about. So tell us a bit about that recipe.
So let me find it. So this is it's so funny. Suddenly it popped out when I was looking again yesterday. So it's called Dissolve the Hurt, and it's a blend that I put together largely for a diffuser. But you could put it in sort of 10 or 15 mils of carrier oil if you wanted to. You know, something like sunflower oil, sweet almond oil, something like that. And it's 1 drop of everlasting or immortelle, however you know it. So Helichrysum metallicum. 1 drop of patchouli. 1 drop of Monarda, and 1 drop of Moldavian dragonhead. And it's a really nice recipe for, or a nice blend for really taking away the pain from something. So something that's really upset you, something that's really hurt you, something that's really sitting with you that you can't kind of move through. And I find generally Helichrysum's really very good for enabling that sense of sitting with hurt, sitting with wounds. And the patchouli, I find, has quite a grounding base. It's also got a bit of a, you won't care about anything after you've used me element. And then the Moldavian dragonhead, I think, is very good for comforting pain, for taking you back to basics, you know, stripping away the layers of weight. And then Monarda has that wonderful warmth and comfort to it. So when I wrote about Monarda for me was, the image I kept coming back to all the time was a woman working in a garden, you know, absolutely full of flowers and beautiful healing plants. And she's there soaking up the sun and nature's all around her. And it's about warmth and wisdom and passing on that knowledge and that sense of wisdom through generations. So, which again is transition, isn't it? It's that movement of knowledge as it goes through the generations. So it's a really nice blend for just moving through hurt and pain and just sitting with it, but allowing yourself to get to a different space that feels more manageable.
So I know nothing about Moldovan. I want to keep saying dragon's blood, dragon head. Will you come back another day and tell us about it? Because I just really love to hear you talking about oils.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of my favorite oils, and again, really, there are people selling it, but really difficult to find if you don't know it exists. Yeah, and it's a wonderful oil, really lovely oil, and very like Monarda in some ways as well. They work really nicely together, actually.
So just to
Okay.
clarify, my two books are on Amazon. Yours is on Amazon, yes, as well.
Yes,
Well,
yeah.
and
Both of mine are on
yours,
Amazon.
Ad, is yours on Amazon?
My book?
Yeah, Gifts of the Essential Oils. Is that
No,
that
not
on?
on Amazon. So in Europe, it's available through essential oil suppliers.
There we go then.
Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah.
Shameless plug. We haven't done a shameless plug for ages.
No, we haven't. And we will put all the links below, whether you're watching or listening. So not only mine and Liz's normal links, but we'll pop Helen's in there as well. Helen, just run us through, off the top of your head, some of the other unusual and rare oils that are in this book, which obviously focuses on lesser known oils. What are some other ones that might whet people's appetite?
Oh gosh, see, this is where I have to go to the references and go, right, which ones did I write about? Just because I've started
I've got
writing
it. Have
about
you got
some
it?
more now.
I've
So
got
I'm
it
like,
in
oh my
front of me.
goodness.
I've got the book. Do you want me to do it, Hel?
Oh, it's okay, I've got it as well, yeah.
You got it, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
so I've got things like, so I've got some Australian ones, so pineapple myrtle, mango myrtle. I use mango myrtle a lot in my practice now. I really absolutely love it for lots of different reasons. Rosalina, we mentioned earlier on. Violet leaf absolute. I love that. Love it for ingrained grief, for people who are really struggling with that level of sorrow that they can't move out of. Goldenrod, again, quite a sort of happy oil. Buddhawood, Copaiba, Combava. So yeah, quite a lot. Damiana, Devil's Club. I love the names, some of them. I know you love the names, Liz. It's like the name of
No,
something really unusual. It's like, oh, that sounds
no,
like it draws you in straight away, doesn't it? You know.
if it sounds like it should go with Eye of Newt, Toe of Frog, it's in.
Absolutely. Brings out the witch in us all, doesn't it?
Well, hopefully in this episode, we've excited you about Monarda, and we've probably just given you a shopping list that's way too long for a whole bunch of essential oils, but make sure what's on top of that list is Helen's new book. It's absolutely amazing. And yeah, I'm doing too much shopping for essential oils, but luckily your great book shows me how to use them all. Helen, thank you so much for joining us on Fellowship of Essential Oils today.
Thank you for having me.
We'll be back
Always a
next week.
star, isn't she?
What was that, Liz?
Always a star, isn't she?
She is. It was amazing. It was amazing. Thank you very much for joining us. We'll see you next week when we dive into another essential oil. Until then, take care.
Bye-bye.